The security checkpoint scanner beeped as another airman passed through Nellis Air Force Base's main gate. Staff Sergeant Lyra Chen adjusted her tactical vest and glanced at her watch. 0645 hours. Another routine morning shift. But routine was about to shatter when two F-35 Lightning IIs would experience catastrophic failure at 30,000 feet, and the voice that would save them belonged to someone who wasn't supposed to exist in any official capacity. The call sign Phoenix 6 hadn't been heard in military communications for over a decade. Today, it would echo across emergency frequencies, turning a base security guard into something the Air Force thought it had buried forever.
Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from. And if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow I've saved something extra special for you. The high desert sun cast long shadows across Nellis Air Force Base as Staff Sergeant Lyra Chen performed her morning security rounds. At 28, she had spent 4 years walking the same perimeter routes, checking the same access points, and maintaining the same professional demeanor that had earned her a reputation as the most reliable security personnel on base. Her uniform was always immaculate, her reports filed with military precision, and her interactions with personnel courteous but unremarkable. "Morning, Chen," called Technical Sergeant Davis from the motor pool, waving as she passed. "Quiet night?" "Always is on the east perimeter," Lyra replied with a slight smile, continuing her patrol route along the reinforced fence line that separated the base from the Nevada desert. What Davis couldn't see was how her eyes automatically calculated sight lines, assessed potential breach points, and cataloged every vehicle movement within a 2-mile radius. The morning briefing in the security office was routine: aircraft movements, personnel changes, weather conditions, and threat assessments that rarely varied from day to day. Captain Morrison, the security flight commander, reviewed the day's schedule with his usual efficiency. "We've got increased F-35 training flights today, 16 sorties between 0800 and 1600 hours. Standard protocols apply, but maintain heightened awareness during launch and recovery windows." Lyra nodded with the others, but her attention was drawn to the flight schedule displayed on the briefing room monitor. Her eyes moved across the aircraft tail numbers and pilot assignments with an intensity that suggested more than casual interest. She memorized call signs, mission parameters, and return times with the unconscious precision of someone whose mind had been trained to process such information as naturally as breathing. After the briefing, Lyra returned to her assigned sector, the eastern approach to the primary runway system. Her security post offered an unobstructed view of the flight line, where F-35 Lightning IIs sat in neat rows, their angular stealth profiles gleaming in the desert sunlight. To most security personnel, they were simply valuable assets to be protected. To Lyra, each aircraft represented thousands of hours of technical knowledge that she wasn't supposed to possess.
"Chen, you've got the tower frequency on your radio, right?" asked Airman First Class Rodriguez, her partner for the morning shift. "Command wants security posts monitoring air traffic today." "Copy that," Lyra responded, adjusting her handheld radio to the appropriate frequency. The casual request was routine, but it meant she would be listening to pilot communications throughout the day. Her superiors had no way of knowing that she understood every nuance of fighter pilot terminology, every procedural call-out, and every deviation from standard operating procedures. The first F-35 took off at 0815 hours, its Pratt & Whitney engine producing the distinctive whine of military thrust. Lyra watched the aircraft accelerate down the runway, tracking its climb profile with eyes that assessed performance parameters most ground personnel wouldn't recognize. The pilot's radio calls were crisp and professional, following standard departure procedures without variation. "Nellis Tower, Viper 2-1, requesting departure, runway 21 left." "Viper 2-1, Nellis Tower, cleared for takeoff, runway 21 left, contact departure control 327.4. By 1,000 hours, 12 F-35s had launched successfully, their missions taking them into the vast training airspace above the Mojave Desert. Lyra continued her patrol duties, checking identification badges, inspecting vehicle passes, and maintaining the security posture that kept America's most advanced fighter jets safe on the ground. But her radio crackled constantly with air traffic communications, and she absorbed every transmission with focused attention. During her lunch break, Lyra sat alone in the base dining facility, picking out a salad while reviewing training manuals that most security personnel found tedious. The material covered standard operating procedures, emergency protocols, and base defense tactics. What wouldn't have been obvious to casual observers was her ability to cross-reference this information with classified flight operations knowledge that wasn't part of any security training curriculum. "You always study during lunch?" asked Staff Sergeant Williams, sliding into the seat across from her. Williams worked in aircraft maintenance and had noticed Lyra's consistent dedication to professional development. "Staying current, never know when additional knowledge might prove useful." Williams nodded approvingly. "I wish more people had your attitude. Half the security folks barely know the difference between an F-35 and an F-16. Lyra's expression remained neutral, but internally, she could have recited the technical specifications, performance capabilities, and tactical employment procedures for both aircraft from memory. Instead, she offered a modest smile. "Just trying to do the job right." The afternoon shift brought increased activity as training flights began returning to base. Lyra repositioned herself at the eastern security checkpoint, where she had clear visibility of the runway approach pattern. Her radio buzzed with return traffic communications, and she found herself unconsciously tracking each aircraft's approach profile.
Nellis Tower, Viper 15, 10 miles southeast, requesting straight-in approach, runway 21 left. Viper 15, Nellis Tower, cleared straight-in approach, runway 21 left, winds 240 at 8, altimeter 30.12. Something in the pilot's voice caught Lyra's attention. A subtle tension that suggested fatigue or stress beyond normal mission parameters. She watched through binoculars as the F-35 appeared on the horizon, its approach angled slightly steeper than standard. Most ground personnel wouldn't have noticed the variation, but Lyra's trained eye immediately identified the deviation. The aircraft landed safely, but Lyra continued monitoring radio traffic with heightened awareness. Years of suppressed training were stirring beneath her carefully maintained facade, instincts awakening that she had worked hard to keep dormant. All stations, this is Nellis Tower. Be advised, weather moving in from the west. Thunderstorms possible after 1,500 hours. All returning aircraft expedite recovery." Lyra glanced toward the western horizon, where building clouds suggested rapidly changing conditions. Her mind automatically began calculating wind patterns, visibility restrictions, and potential complications for aircraft still airborne. The knowledge came unbidden, rising from depths of expertise she had spent 4 years pretending not to possess. As the afternoon progressed, the weather situation deteriorated faster than forecast. By 14:30 hours, visibility had dropped significantly, and gusty crosswinds were making aircraft recovery increasingly challenging. Lyra watched from her security post as ground crews secured equipment and pilots struggled with difficult landing conditions. Tower, Viper 08, requesting priority landing. Low fuel state, weather getting worse. Viper 08, Tower, cleared priority approach, runway 21 left. Be advised, winds now 280 at 15, gusts to 25. The F-35 materialized through the haze, its landing lights cutting through the dust and reduced visibility. Lyra found herself unconsciously holding her breath as the pilot fought crosswinds during final approach. The aircraft touched down hard but safely, sliding slightly before the pilot regained directional control. 2 more F-35s remained airborne, their fuel states becoming critical as weather conditions continued deteriorating. Lyra's radio crackled with increasingly tense communications between the tower and the remaining pilots. Her hands gripped the security post railing as suppressed knowledge and instincts demanded acknowledgement. Nellis Tower, Viper 12 declaring minimum fuel, requesting an immediate approach. Viper 12, Tower, cleared immediate approach, runway 21 left. Emergency equipment standing by. The aircraft appeared through the growing storm, its approach unstable in the turbulent conditions. Lyra watched with expert eyes as the pilot fought crosswinds during final approach. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. 15 years earlier, Edwards Air Force Base, California. 9-year-old Lyra Chin pressed her nose against the chain-link fence surrounding the flight line, watching an F-22 Raptor taxi toward the runway. The August heat shimmered off the concrete, but she remained transfixed by the angular stealth fighter's graceful movement across the tarmac. "Come away from there, little sparrow," called her grandfather, Colonel David Hawk Sterling, using the pet name he'd given her since she could walk. At 58, Sterling commanded respect wherever he went on base, his silver hair and weathered face marking him as a veteran of 3 decades of military aviation. But with Lyra, his stern demeanor softened into something approaching gentleness. "Grandpa, why do the jets make different sounds when they turn?" Lyra asked, finally stepping back from the fence. Her young mind had already begun cataloging the subtle variations in engine noise that most adults never noticed. Sterling knelt beside her, his experienced eyes following her gaze to the departing aircraft. "Because you're listening with a pilot's ears, little sparrow. Most people hear noise. Pilots hear information." He pointed toward the F-22 as it began its takeoff roll. "That engine note tells you power setting, atmospheric conditions, even the pilot's experience level if you know how to listen." What Sterling didn't tell his granddaughter was that she possessed something extraordinary, an intuitive understanding of flight dynamics that he'd never encountered in 30 years of military aviation. During her frequent visits to Edwards, Lyra would spend hours watching aircraft operations, unconsciously absorbing knowledge that took most pilots years to master. "Can you teach me to fly?" she asked during one of their walks along the flight line perimeter. "When you're older, I promise. But I can teach you to see like a pilot sees. Would you like that?" Their lessons began that summer in Sterling's home office, a room lined with aviation manuals, tactical publications, and photographs from his career spanning the transition from Vietnam-era fighters to modern stealth aircraft. What appeared to be casual grandfather-granddaughter time was actually systematic education in flight theory, aircraft systems, and tactical aviation. "Flying isn't about controlling the aircraft," Sterling explained during one of their sessions, using a detailed cutaway diagram of an F-16's flight control system. "It's about becoming part of the aircraft. The best pilots don't just operate their jets, they think with them." Lyra absorbed these lessons with remarkable aptitude. By age 12, she could identify aircraft by their engine signatures alone, calculate basic flight parameters in her head, and understand tactical formations that challenged experienced ground personnel. Sterling watched her development with a mixture of pride and concern, recognizing abilities that exceeded anything he'd seen in formal pilot training programs. The summer Lyra turned 14, Sterling made a decision that would shape the rest of her life. Instead of their usual theoretical discussions, he brought her to a civilian flight school operating out of a small airfield 30 miles from Edwards. "Today, you fly," he announced, leading her toward a Cessna 172 trainer aircraft. Lyra's first flight lasted 2 hours. By the end of it, the civilian flight instructor was staring at Sterling with undisguised amazement. "Colonel, your granddaughter has more natural flying ability than students with 50 hours of instruction. She's handling control inputs like she's been flying for years." What the instructor didn't know was that Lyra had been flying, in her mind, since she was 9 years old. Every aircraft observation, every system discussion, every tactical lesson had built a comprehensive understanding that translated seamlessly into physical control of the aircraft. Over the following summers, Sterling continued Lyra's unconventional education. She earned her private pilot's license at 17, added instrument and commercial ratings by 19, and demonstrated flight skills that impressed veteran military aviators. But Sterling insisted their training remain unofficial, conducted away from military channels and documentation. "Why can't I apply to the Air Force Academy?" Lyra asked during her senior year of high school. Her grades were exemplary, her test scores outstanding, and her flying abilities unprecedented for someone her age. Sterling's expression grew serious. Because there are things about my career that I haven't told you, little sparrow. Things that might make your association with me complicated. That conversation took place in Sterling's study, where he finally revealed the classified aspects of his military service. Beyond his official record as a test pilot and squadron commander lay a deeper history with a program called Phoenix Initiative, an experimental project that selected pilots with extraordinary abilities for classified missions requiring capabilities beyond conventional training. Phoenix 6 was my call sign, Sterling explained, showing Lyra a photograph of himself standing beside an aircraft she didn't recognize. Sleek, angular, clearly experimental. From 1985 to 1995, I flew missions that officially never happened, using aircraft that officially never existed. The Phoenix Initiative had been created during the height of the Cold War to develop pilots capable of operating advanced experimental aircraft in situations where conventional forces couldn't be deployed. The program selected individuals who demonstrated not just exceptional flying skills, but intuitive understanding of flight dynamics that bordered on the supernatural. We called it pilot sense, the ability to feel what an aircraft needed before instruments could provide that information, to understand flight conditions, tactical situations, and system malfunctions through intuition rather than training. Lyra listened with growing understanding. The abilities she had demonstrated, the natural comprehension of flight theory, the instinctive grasp of tactical aviation, these weren't just talents. They were inherited traits that had made her grandfather one of the military's most classified assets. The program ended in 1995, Sterling said, his voice heavy with memories. Political changes, budget cuts, and a new focus on technology over human capability. Most Phoenix pilots were reassigned to conventional units. Some, like me, were moved into training and development roles. A few simply disappeared into other classified programs. But Sterling's involvement with Phoenix hadn't ended with the program's official termination. For the past decade, he had been part of a small group of former Phoenix pilots who monitored emerging threats that might require their unique capabilities. They operated independently, maintaining connections within the military and intelligence communities while remaining officially retired. There are things happening now that worry us, Sterling told Lyra during one of their final training sessions before she left for college. Foreign adversaries with advanced aircraft, terrorist organizations acquiring sophisticated weapons, situations that might require pilot capabilities that conventional training can't produce. Sterling had been preparing Lyra not just for flying, but for a role she might one day need to fill. The Phoenix Initiative had identified certain families with genetic predispositions towards exceptional pilot abilities. The Chen bloodline, through Lyra's grandmother, carried markers that had produced 3 generations of extraordinary aviators.
Your choice, little sparrow, Sterling said as Lyra prepared to leave for her freshman year at MIT. You can pursue a conventional career in aviation, or you can be ready for something more. If you choose the conventional path, I'll support you completely. But if you're willing to prepare for the unconventional path, I can teach you things that aren't written in any manual. Lyra chose preparation. Her college years were split between academic excellence in aerospace engineering and clandestine training with Sterling's network of Phoenix veterans. Summers were spent at remote airfields, learning to fly aircraft that weren't supposed to exist, mastering tactics that weren't taught in any military curriculum, and developing skills that prepared her for missions that might never come. Phoenix pilots don't just fly aircraft, explained Colonel Sarah Martinez, one of Sterling's former teammates during a training session in the Nevada desert. We become the aircraft. We think in 3 dimensions, react faster than human reflexes should allow, and make decisions that conventional training says are impossible. The training was demanding beyond anything Lyra had imagined. She learned to fly by instruments alone in conditions that would ground normal pilots. to navigate using only radio emissions and engine sounds, to operate aircraft systems through intuition when technical manuals provided no guidance. Most importantly, she learned to trust capabilities that conventional aviation wisdom said didn't exist. By her senior year at MIT, Lyra possessed flight skills that exceeded most military pilots with decades of experience. She could operate any aircraft she encountered, understand complex tactical situations instantly, and make split-second decisions under pressure that saved lives and completed missions. But none of this training appeared in any official record. Why all the secrecy? She asked Sterling during one of their final sessions. Because Phoenix pilots are force multipliers, he replied. One pilot with Phoenix capabilities can accomplish missions that might require entire squadrons using conventional methods. That makes us valuable assets, but also potential targets if the wrong people learn about our abilities. Sterling's concerns proved prophetic. During Lyra's final semester at MIT, he was killed in what appeared to be a civilian aircraft accident. The crash investigation found mechanical failure in his personal aircraft, but Sterling's Phoenix colleagues suspected otherwise. Too many former Phoenix pilots had died in accidents over the past few years for coincidence to be a plausible explanation. At Sterling's funeral, Lyra met the surviving members of his Phoenix network, 7 aging pilots who had maintained their skills and connections despite official retirement. They gathered around her after the service, their weathered faces bearing expressions of respect and determination. "He prepared you well," said Colonel James Hunter, Sterling's former wingman. "We've been watching your progress. Your capabilities exceed what we thought possible from someone without combat experience." "What happens now?" Lyra asked, still processing the loss of the man who had shaped her entire understanding of aviation and purpose. "That depends on you," Martinez replied. "We can arrange for you to enter military service through conventional channels. With your education and demonstrated abilities, you'd excel in any aviation role. Or you can become what your grandfather intended, a Phoenix pilot ready for missions that don't officially exist." Lyra chose a third path that surprised them all.
"I want to serve, but not in ways that create official records or draw attention," she told the gathering. "If there are threats that require Phoenix capabilities to address, I need to be positioned where I can act without bureaucratic constraints or political considerations." The solution came from Colonel Martinez, who had transitioned into military personnel management after her Phoenix service. Base security positions provide access to flight operations without requiring pilot credentials. You'd be invisible to most people, but positioned to respond if Phoenix-level threats emerge. 6 months later, Staff Sergeant Lyra Chen reported to Nellis Air Force Base for security duty, carrying credentials that listed only basic qualifications. Her true abilities remained hidden behind a facade of competent but unremarkable service, while her Phoenix training remained ready for activation at a moment's notice. For 4 years, she had maintained this careful balance. She observed flight operations with expert eyes while pretending to see only what security personnel were supposed to notice. She monitored radio communications with comprehensive understanding, while acting as though she heard only routine traffic. She assessed aircraft performance and pilot capabilities with professional precision, while maintaining the appearance of casual interest. Sterling's final gift to her had been a secure communication device, disguised as a standard security radio, but capable of accessing frequencies that didn't officially exist. The device remained in her equipment kit, unused, but ready for the day when circumstances might require Phoenix 6 to become active again. That day was about to arrive as storm clouds gathered over Nellis Air Force Base and Major Thompson's F-35 struggled through increasingly dangerous weather conditions. The training Sterling had provided,
the legacy he had passed down, and the capabilities he had carefully cultivated were about to be tested in ways that would reveal whether his faith in his granddaughter had been justified. In her security post, watching the approaching emergency, Lyra felt the weight of 15 years of preparation. The little girl who had pressed her face against the fence to watch fighters take off was gone, replaced by someone who possessed abilities that could mean the difference between life and death for pilots in distress. The Phoenix Initiative had officially ended 28 years ago, but Phoenix 6 was about to return to active duty. The thunderstorm hit Nellis Air Force Base with the sudden violence that characterized desert weather systems. Within minutes, visibility dropped to near zero as dust and rain created a wall of brown chaos across the flight line. Major Thompson's F-35, call sign Viper 06, was still 20 miles out and running critically low on fuel. Nellis Tower, Viper 06, I'm showing less than 800 pounds remaining. Weather at alternate fields is worse than primary. I need vectors for an immediate approach. Lyra pressed closer to the perimeter fence, her security radio crackling with increasingly desperate communications. Through the storm, she could see emergency vehicles positioning themselves along the runway. Crash trucks, ambulances, and foam units preparing for what everyone feared might be an inevitable disaster. Viper 06, Nellis Tower, winds now 320 at 25, gusts to 40. Visibility quarter-mile in dust and rain. Be advised we're at minimums for F-35 operations. Tower, I don't have enough fuel to wait for conditions to improve. I'm declaring emergency status and requesting priority handling. Air Traffic Controller Senior Airman Jessica Murphy's voice remained professionally calm despite the growing crisis. Viper 06, emergency declared. You have priority. All other traffic is holding. Emergency equipment is standing by.
From her position at the Eastern Security Post, Lyra watched the situation deteriorate with mounting concern. Her trained eye assessed wind patterns, visibility restrictions, and runway conditions that were pushing well beyond safe operational limits. Major Thompson was an experienced pilot, but the F-35 Lightning II was notoriously challenging to land in severe crosswind conditions. "Jen, you monitoring this?" asked Airman Rodriguez through their security net. "Sounds like we might have a real problem developing." "Copy that," Lyra replied, her attention divided between official security duties and the aviation emergency unfolding in the storm. "Emergency services are positioned. We just need to maintain perimeter security and stay clear of the runway area." What she didn't say was that she could hear subtleties in Major Thompson's radio transmissions that suggested increasing stress and fatigue. His voice carried the telltale tightness of a pilot dealing with multiple emergencies simultaneously: critically low fuel, deteriorating weather, and an aircraft that would be difficult to control in these conditions, even for someone with his experience level. The F-35's advanced flight control systems were designed to help pilots manage challenging situations, but the Lightning II had limitations that weren't widely known outside the pilot community. In severe crosswind conditions, the aircraft's broad fuselage created aerodynamic issues that could overwhelm even sophisticated fly-by-wire systems. Major Thompson was about to attempt a landing that would test both his skills and his aircraft's capabilities to their absolute limits. "Tower, Viper 06, I have the field in sight. Winds are really working me over out here. Request wind check." "Viper 06, winds 330 at 28, gusts to 42. You're cleared to land runway 21 left. Emergency equipment is in position." Lyra could see the F-35's lights cutting through the storm, the aircraft barely visible as it fought through the turbulent approach. Through binoculars, she watched Major Thompson battle crosswinds that were pushing his jet well outside normal approach parameters. The aircraft was crabbing severely, nose pointed significantly left of the runway centerline to compensate for wind drift. "Looking rough," Rodriguez observed, joining her at the fence line. "Never seen conditions this bad for a fighter recovery." Lyra nodded grimly, her experienced eye tracking the F-35's unstable approach.
She could see that Major Thompson was fighting control inputs, the aircraft's response sluggish as sophisticated flight computers struggled to interpret conflicting aerodynamic forces. At this angle of attack, in these wind conditions, with critically low fuel eliminating any possibility of a second approach, the margin for error had essentially disappeared.
Tower, Viper 06, I'm not getting a good control response. Aircraft feels sluggish in these crosswinds. The transmission sent a chill through Lyra's spine. Major Thompson had just described a condition that she recognized from her grandfather's training. Aerodynamic stall characteristics that could develop in the F-35 when specific combinations of angle of attack, wind conditions, and power settings created a situation where normal control inputs produced unexpected results. The Lightning II was approaching a flight regime where its advanced systems might not be able to compensate for extreme external conditions. If Major Thompson didn't recognize the developing situation and make immediate corrections, his aircraft could depart controlled flight at an altitude and airspeed that would make recovery impossible. Viper 06, Tower, you appear slightly high on the glide path. Recommend power reduction and descent to correct profile. Negative, Tower. Power reduction in these conditions could put me behind the power curve, maintaining current configuration. Major Thompson's response demonstrated good pilot judgment, but Lyra could see through her binoculars that his aircraft was developing the early signs of a deep stall condition. The F-35's nose was beginning to oscillate slightly, subtle movements that indicated the flight control system was near its limits in managing the aircraft's flight path. She reached for her security radio, her thumb hovering over the transmit button. Standard protocol prohibited security personnel from interfering with air traffic control operations. But standard protocol hadn't anticipated situations where security personnel possessed the knowledge necessary to prevent aviation disasters. Tower, Viper 06, I'm experiencing some unusual control responses. The aircraft is not responding normally to pitch inputs. The transmission confirmed Lyra's worst fears. Major Thompson was encountering the F-35's most dangerous flight characteristic, a condition where the aircraft's computer-controlled flight systems could become confused by external conditions and begin providing control responses that worked against pilot inputs rather than supporting them. Viper 06, Tower, understand you're experiencing control difficulties. Emergency equipment is standing by. You're currently 2 miles from touchdown. Through the storm, Lyra watched the F-35 continue its troubled approach. The aircraft was now clearly outside normal flight parameters, its control surfaces moving in rapid, small corrections that suggested the flight control computer was struggling to maintain stable flight. At less than 500 feet altitude and critically low on fuel, Major Thompson was running out of options and time. Tower, Viper 06, I think I'm entering a stall condition. Controls are not responding properly. Air traffic controller Murphy's voice remained steady, but Lyra could hear the underlying tension. Viper 06, Roger, you have the runway. Emergency services are ready. The F-35 was now less than a mile from touchdown, but its flight path had become increasingly erratic. Through her binoculars, Lyra could see the aircraft's nose beginning to drop, despite what appeared to be the pilot's attempts to maintain proper approach angle. The Lightning II was entering a deep stall condition in severe crosswinds at low altitude, a combination that had killed pilots in advanced aircraft before. Major Thompson's next transmission confirmed the developing disaster. Tower, I'm losing control authority. The aircraft is not responding to stick inputs. I think the flight control system is fighting me. The situation had moved beyond difficult to potentially catastrophic. In less than 60 seconds, unless something drastically changed, Major Thompson's F-35 would either crash short of the runway or impact the ground in an uncontrolled configuration that would likely prove fatal. Lyra's hand tightened on her security radio. She possessed knowledge that could save Major Thompson's life, but using that knowledge would expose abilities she had kept hidden for 4 years. The moment of decision was approaching faster than the troubled F-35, fighting through its final approach. Through the storm, she could see the aircraft's landing lights wavering as Major Thompson fought control systems that were no longer helping him fly his jet.
The F-35's sophisticated computers, designed to keep pilots safe in extreme conditions, had encountered a situation beyond their programming parameters and were now creating the very emergency they were meant to prevent.
Rodriguez, Lyra called to her security partner, I need you to take over perimeter watch. Something's not right with this approach. Chen, what are you thinking? We're security. We don't get involved with flight operations. Lyra looked at her partner with an expression he'd never seen before. Intense focus mixed with determination that suggested hidden depths to the woman he thought he knew. Sometimes security means more than checking identification cards. She moved away from Rodriguez, positioning herself where her security radio could reach maximum transmission power. The decision she was about to make would change everything. But Major Thompson's F-35 was now less than 30 seconds from touchdown, and the aircraft's control problems were worsening with each passing moment. Tower, Viper 06, I'm not going to make the runway, preparing for the ejection sequence. The transmission galvanized everyone monitoring the emergency frequency. Ejection over a populated area in severe weather conditions carried enormous risks, but attempting to continue the approach in an uncontrollable aircraft was potentially suicidal. Lyra made her choice. She switched her security radio to the emergency frequency and pressed the transmit button. When she spoke, her voice carried an authority and technical precision that came from 15 years of preparation for exactly this moment. Viper 6, Phoenix 6, you're not in a stall condition. You're encountering flight control coupling in severe crosswind conditions. Your computers are overcompensating for wind effects. Switch to manual reversion mode immediately and use rudder inputs to maintain directional control. The transmission sent shockwaves through the control tower. Phoenix 6 was a call sign that hadn't been heard on military communications for over a decade, a ghost identifier from a classified program that officially no longer existed. Major Thompson's response came immediately. Phoenix 6, Viper 06, I don't show manual reversion option in current configuration. Viper 06, Phoenix 6, emergency flight control override. Push and hold both paddle switches simultaneously for 5 seconds, then center the stick and use rudder pedals for directional control. Your flight control computer is misreading wind shear as aerodynamic instability. Lyra's instructions were based on knowledge that wasn't included in standard F-35 pilot training, emergency procedures that were classified at levels above Major Thompson's clearance level. But in 30 seconds, those procedures might be the only thing standing between him and disaster. Phoenix 6, Viper 06, attempting emergency override now. Through her binoculars, Lyra watched the F-35's flight path begin to stabilize as Major Thompson followed her instructions. The aircraft's control surfaces stopped their erratic movements, and the Lightning II's approach angle improved dramatically as the pilot regained effective control of his aircraft. Phoenix 6, Viper 06, that worked. I have positive control again. Thank you, whoever you are. Viper 06, Phoenix 6, continue approach using manual inputs. Your fuel state requires immediate landing. Emergency services are standing by. The F-35 touched down hard but safely, its landing gear absorbing the impact as Major Thompson used every skill he possessed to bring the fighter to a controlled stop on the rain-slicked runway. Emergency vehicles immediately converged on the aircraft, but the worst had been averted. In the control tower, Air Traffic Controller Murphy was staring at her radio equipment with confusion and growing concern. The Phoenix 6 transmission had come from a frequency that wasn't supposed to exist, using a call sign that had been retired from military communications years before. Across the base, security personnel and maintenance crews who had monitored the emergency were asking the same questions. Who was Phoenix 6, and how had they known procedures that weren't in any current technical manual? At her security post, Lyra Chen slowly replaced her radio in its equipment holder, knowing that her 4 years of anonymity were over.
She had just revealed capabilities that would demand explanation, using knowledge that officially didn't exist to save the life of a pilot who would soon be asking very pointed questions about his mysterious rescuer.
Rodriguez approached her with an expression of bewildered respect. "Chen, what the hell just happened? How did you know all that technical stuff about F-35 systems?" Before she could answer, her security radio crackled with a transmission that confirmed her worst fears. "All security personnel, this is base operations. Report to your supervisors immediately for debriefing regarding the emergency communications during Viper 06's approach. Command wants to know who transmitted on emergency frequencies using an unauthorized call sign." Lyra looked toward the control tower, where she could see figures moving behind illuminated windows. Very soon, people would be asking questions that her cover story couldn't answer. The abilities she had kept hidden for 4 years had just saved Major Thompson's life, but they had also exposed her to scrutiny that could uncover everything her grandfather had taught her to protect. The storm was beginning to clear, but Lyra Chen's real challenges were just beginning. The debriefing room in Building 1482 was sterile and windowless, designed to focus attention on the matter at hand without external distractions. Staff Sergeant Lyra Chen sat across from Lieutenant Colonel Webst Webb, the base communications officer, and Major Patricia Hayes from the Office of Special Investigations. Between them lay her personnel file, security clearances, and a digital recorder that had been running for the past 20 minutes. "Let's go through this one more time, Sergeant Chen," Lieutenant Colonel Webb said, his fingers drumming against the metal table. "You claim you heard the emergency transmission between Viper 06 and the tower, recognized that Major Thompson was in distress, and decided to offer assistance based on general knowledge of aircraft systems." "That's correct, sir," Lyra replied, maintaining the careful balance between cooperation and concealment that she had been practicing since the interview began. Major Hayes leaned forward, consulting notes that covered several pages. "Your personnel file indicates basic aircraft recognition training as part of your security certification. Nothing about advanced flight systems, emergency procedures, or the specific technical knowledge you demonstrated during the incident." "I've always been interested in aviation, ma'am. I study technical manuals during my off-duty time." "Technical manuals," Webb repeated. "Sergeant Chen, the procedures you described to Major Thompson aren't contained in any unclassified F-35 documentation. Emergency flight control override protocols are restricted to pilots with specific clearance levels." The room fell silent as the implications of Webb's statement settled over the 3 occupants. Lyra knew this moment would come, the point where her carefully constructed cover story would encounter facts that couldn't be explained away with casual interest in aviation. "Sir, I may have been mistaken about the specific terminology. I heard Major Thompson describing control problems and suggested what seemed like logical troubleshooting steps based on general flight principles." Major Hayes consulted another document. "We've interviewed Major Thompson extensively about the incident. He's adamant that your instructions were precisely accurate for the emergency situation he encountered. He also states that the call sign Phoenix 6 was used with authority that suggested official status." Webb's expression had grown increasingly serious as the interview progressed. "Sergeant Chen, Phoenix 6 is not a call sign that appears in any current Air Force documentation. However, our communications people ran traces on historical usage. That identifier was associated with classified programs from the 1980s and 1990s. Lyra felt her careful facade beginning to crumble. The investigation had moved far beyond routine inquiry into unauthorized radio transmission. They were uncovering connections that led directly to her grandfather's classified service and the Phoenix Initiative. "Sir, I'm not familiar with any historical programs. I chose that call sign because it seemed appropriate for an emergency situation." "Appropriate how?" Major Hayes pressed,
Phoenix 6 specifically, not Phoenix 1 or Eagle or any of dozens of other possibilities. You selected an identifier that hadn't been used on military frequencies for over 2 decades.
Before Lyra could respond, the interview was interrupted by a sharp knock on the door. Webb called for entry, and Captain Morrison, her security flight commander, stepped into the room carrying a classified message folder. "Sir, priority communication from Air Combat Command. They're requesting an immediate video conference regarding the emergency response incident." Webb's eyebrows rose as he examined the message classification. "Captain, this is above your clearance level. Please wait outside." As Morrison left, Webb activated a secure communication terminal mounted on the wall. Within moments, the screen displayed the face of Brigadier General Sandra Pierce, Director of Air Force Special Programs. "Lieutenant Colonel Webb, Major Hayes," General Pierce began without preamble. "I understand you're conducting an investigation into yesterday's emergency response incident. I need to speak with Staff Sergeant Chen immediately." "General, Sergeant Chen is here, but I should note that our investigation has raised questions about unauthorized access to classified information and—" "Colonel Webb," Pierce interrupted, "what I'm about to discuss requires privacy. Please clear the room except for Sergeant Chen." Webb and Hayes exchanged glances of confusion and concern, but military protocol was clear. They gathered their materials and left Lyra alone in the debriefing room, facing a general officer whose expression suggested she knew far more about the situation than the local investigators. "Sergeant Chen," General Pierce said once the room was cleared, "or should I say, Phoenix 7. The designation hit Lyra like a physical blow. Phoenix 7 had been her grandfather's proposed call sign for her if she ever entered active service with the program. Only 3 people had ever known that identifier: her grandfather, Colonel Martinez, and Colonel Hunter from Sterling's Phoenix network. "Ma'am, I don't understand the reference." "Your grandfather was David Sterling, call sign Phoenix 6. He died in what appeared to be a civilian aircraft accident 5 years ago, but which we now know was eliminated by hostile forces attempting to suppress Phoenix Initiative intelligence." Lyra's composure finally cracked. "You knew about Grandpa's murder?" "We suspected, but couldn't prove it without risking exposure of surviving Phoenix assets. Your transmission yesterday confirmed something we've been hoping for, that Phoenix 6 passed his capabilities to a new generation." Pierce consulted documents that weren't visible on the video link. "Your performance during the emergency demonstrated knowledge and judgment that match Phoenix Initiative selection criteria. More importantly, you used that knowledge instinctively to save a pilot's life, exactly as your grandfather would have done." "Ma'am, I was just trying to help Major Thompson. I didn't mean to expose any classified programs or—" "Sergeant Chen, you didn't expose anything. You validated everything." Pierce's expression softened slightly. "For the past decade, we've been quietly rebuilding Phoenix Initiative capabilities in response to emerging threats. Your grandfather's death convinced us that hostile forces were systematically targeting Phoenix assets, but it also demonstrated that Phoenix abilities could be passed to family members through training and genetic predisposition." The revelation explained why the investigation had escalated so quickly and why a general officer was personally involved in what should have been a routine security matter. "The F-35 incident wasn't random, Sergeant Chen. Major Thompson was flying a test profile designed to evaluate new flight control software under extreme weather conditions. Someone compromised that test, introducing software modifications that would have caused exactly the control problems he experienced." Lyra felt a chill of understanding. It was a setup. Someone wanted to crash that F-35 during testing to discredit the new software. More than that, they wanted to eliminate Major Thompson specifically. He's been investigating irregularities in F-35 software development contracts. His death in an apparent pilot error scenario would have ended that investigation permanently. General Pierce activated another screen showing technical diagrams that Lyra recognized as F-35 flight control schematics. The software modifications were sophisticated enough to avoid detection during normal testing, but would have proven fatal in the exact weather conditions present yesterday. Only someone with intimate knowledge of Phoenix Initiative training methods would have recognized the solution you provided to Major Thompson. Who would have that knowledge, ma'am? That's what we need to find out. Over the past 5 years, we've lost 7 former Phoenix pilots to accidents that showed patterns of sophisticated planning and inside knowledge. Someone is systematically eliminating Phoenix assets, and they have access to information that should be impossible to obtain. The conversation was interrupted by urgent knocking on the door. General Pierce authorized entry, and Lieutenant Colonel Webb returned with an expression of barely controlled alarm. "General, we have a situation. Major Thompson's F-35 is missing from the maintenance hangar. Security cameras show 3 individuals with proper credentials removing the aircraft approximately 30 minutes ago."
Pierce's face went rigid. "Full base lockdown immediately. That aircraft contains evidence of software tampering. If it's destroyed, we lose our proof of deliberate sabotage." As Webb left to coordinate base security response, Pierce turned back to Lyra with an expression of grim determination. "Sergeant Chen, your cover is blown regardless of how this plays out. The people who killed your grandfather now know you exist, and they'll move against you just as they move against him." "What are my options, ma'am?" "You can accept official transfer into Phoenix Initiative operations and help us identify the hostile network. Or you can maintain your current assignment and wait for them to eliminate you. There are no other choices." Lyra thought of her grandfather's training, his warnings about corrupted institutions, and his emphasis on using Phoenix abilities to protect innocent lives rather than serve political agendas. "If I accept the transfer, what would be my mission?" "Recover that stolen F-35 and identify who's been compromising our programs. The theft is happening now, which means the hostile network is activating in response to yesterday's incident. They see you as a threat that needs immediate elimination." Through the building's walls, Lyra could hear the wailing of base alarm systems as security forces responded to the aircraft theft. Her decision would determine not just her own fate, but potentially the survival of the remaining Phoenix network and the exposure of a conspiracy that had already cost multiple lives. "General, I accept transfer to Phoenix operations." Pierce nodded with evident satisfaction. "Phoenix 7 is now active. Report to Hangar 18 in 30 minutes for operational briefing and equipment issue. Your first mission begins immediately." The video link terminated, leaving Lyra alone in the debriefing room that had become the place where her carefully maintained double life finally ended. For 4 years, she had hidden her abilities behind the facade of competent but unremarkable security service. Those days were over. She reached into her pocket and withdrew the secure communication device her grandfather had given her, the encrypted radio that could access Phoenix frequencies. For the first time since his death, she activated the device and heard the distinctive tone that indicated connection to the Phoenix network. "All Phoenix stations, this is Phoenix 7. I'm operational and requesting status of all assets." The responses came immediately from around the country. Aging pilots who had maintained their capabilities despite official retirement, intelligence analysts who had continued monitoring threats independently, and technical specialists who had preserved knowledge of classified programs that officially no longer existed. "Phoenix 7, Phoenix 3. We've been waiting for this transmission for 5 years. Confirm you're Sterling's granddaughter." "Phoenix 3, Phoenix 7. Confirmed. Grandfather said you'd know the verification phrase." "Phoenix 7, the eagle flies at dawn when shadows grow long." "Phoenix 3, and wise hunters know when to take the shot." Lyra completed the phrase her grandfather had taught her years earlier. "Phoenix 7, welcome to active service. Be advised, we have assets moving to support your current situation. The stolen F-35 is being tracked by satellite, and we have teams positioning for recovery operations." As Lyra left the debriefing room and headed toward Hangar 18,
She felt the weight of 15 years of preparation settling into focused determination. Her grandfather's training, her Phoenix heritage, and her commitment to protecting innocent lives had converged into a moment of clarity about her true purpose. Staff Sergeant Lyra Chen, base security, had ceased to exist. Phoenix 7 was now operational, carrying forward a legacy that hostile forces had tried unsuccessfully to eliminate. The abilities she had hidden were about to be tested in ways that would determine whether Phoenix Initiative training could prevail against enemies who had spent years planning their destruction. The aircraft theft wasn't just about covering up evidence. It was the opening move in a larger operation designed to eliminate Phoenix assets permanently. But the conspirators made one critical error. They revealed themselves before confirming that all Phoenix capabilities had been neutralized. Phoenix 7 was about to demonstrate why that mistake would prove fatal to their plans. Hangar 18 sat at the far edge of Nellis Air Force Base, isolated from routine operations and surrounded by additional security barriers that most personnel never questioned. As Lyra approached the facility, she noticed details that her Phoenix training allowed her to recognize. Defensive positioning, communications equipment disguised as standard maintenance gear, and personnel whose movements suggested military backgrounds far more extensive than their apparent ranks indicated. The hangar doors opened at her approach, revealing an interior that defied expectations. Instead of aircraft maintenance bays, the space had been converted into a sophisticated operations center. Banks of computer screens displayed real-time intelligence feeds, satellite tracking data, and communication intercepts from around the globe. At the center of the facility stood a conference table where 3 figures waited for her arrival. Phoenix 7, welcome to active service, called Colonel Sarah Martinez, whom Lyra recognized from her grandfather's network. Now wearing civilian clothes instead of military uniform, Martinez moved with the same confident bearing that had characterized her during Lyra's training sessions years earlier. Beside her stood Colonel James Hunter, Sterling's former wingman, his weathered face bearing new lines of strain that suggested the Phoenix network had faced significant challenges since their last meeting. The third figure was unknown to Lyra, a woman in her 40s with sharp eyes and the precise posture of someone accustomed to command authority. Phoenix 7, meet Angela Foster, formerly NSA Signals Intelligence, currently our primary analyst for hostile network activities, Martinez said by way of introduction. She's been tracking the conspiracy that killed your grandfather and the other Phoenix assets. Foster activated a large display screen that showed a complex web of interconnected data points, corporate entities, government contracts, personnel movements, and financial transactions that spanned multiple countries and decades. What you're looking at is the Shadow Vector Network, a consortium of defense contractors, foreign intelligence services, and corrupted military personnel who've been systematically compromising American aerospace programs for over 15 years. Lyra studied the display, her Phoenix training allowing her to process the complex relationships between seemingly unrelated entities. They're not just stealing technology. They're creating situations where their preferred companies win contracts by eliminating superior alternatives. Exactly, Hunter confirmed. The F-35 program has been their primary target because of its potential to dominate military aviation for the next 30 years. By introducing subtle flaws in competing systems and eliminating key personnel who might expose their activities, Shadow Vector has influenced billions of dollars in defense contracts. Foster highlighted specific data points on the display. Your grandfather discovered their operations during his investigation into unusual accident patterns among test pilots and program managers. Phoenix pilots were particularly dangerous to them because your enhanced situational awareness made it difficult for Shadow Vector to create convincing accidents. The revelation explained the systematic targeting of Phoenix assets over the past 5 years. The network hadn't been eliminating former pilots randomly. They had been removing specific individuals whose abilities posed threats to carefully orchestrated sabotage operations. The stolen F-35 from yesterday represents a major escalation. That aircraft contains evidence of software modifications that could expose Shadow Vector's infiltration of the Lightning II program. They've moved from subtle manipulation to direct action because your intervention yesterday prevented Major Thompson's elimination. Lyra absorbed this information while studying personnel files displayed on surrounding monitors. Major Thompson wasn't just investigating contract irregularities. He was specifically tracking software anomalies that could prove Shadow Vector's involvement. Thompson is one of 12 military personnel who've been asking uncomfortable questions about F-35 development, Foster explained. Shadow Vector has been eliminating them systematically, but your grandfather's death made them overconfident. They didn't expect Phoenix capabilities to surface in a new generation.
Hunter moved to another display, showing real-time satellite tracking data. The stolen F-35 is currently 200 miles northwest of here, being transported by ground convoy toward a facility in Utah that doesn't officially exist. Our intelligence indicates Shadow Vector intends to destroy the aircraft and eliminate all evidence of their tampering. "What's our mission priority?" Lyra asked, her training automatically shifting her focus toward operational planning. "Recovery of the aircraft and capture of Shadow Vector personnel," Martinez replied. "But the larger mission is exposure of their entire network. We've spent 5 years gathering evidence, but we need proof that will survive legal scrutiny and media investigation." Foster activated another screen, showing intercepts of encrypted communications. Shadow Vector's operational security has been compromised by their escalation. We're intercepting communications that reveal the full scope of their activities, not just F-35 sabotage, but systematic corruption affecting multiple aerospace programs. The intercepted communications painted a picture of conspiracy that exceeded anything Lyra had imagined. Shadow Vector had influenced the development of fighter aircraft, transport planes, satellite systems, and missile defense programs. Their activities had compromised American military superiority while generating enormous profits for network members. "How many people are involved?" Lyra asked, studying the organizational charts that showed connections spanning multiple countries and industries. Core Network appears to be approximately 40 individuals, but they've cultivated relationships with hundreds of others who provide support without understanding the full scope of operations. Defense contractors, government officials, military personnel, intelligence analysts, all contributing to Shadow Vector objectives while believing they're serving legitimate purposes. Martinez highlighted specific entries on the personnel database. 3 Shadow Vector assets are currently stationed here at Nellis. They've been monitoring Phoenix activities and reporting to network leadership about potential threats to their operations. The revelation sent a chill through Lyra's spine. For 4 years, she had worked alongside people who were actively supporting the conspiracy that had killed her grandfather and multiple other Phoenix pilots. Who are they? Technical Sergeant Bradley Walsh in aircraft maintenance, Captain Jennifer Price in communications, and Major Robert Kane in flight operations, Foster identified, displaying their photographs and service records. All 3 have legitimate military careers but have been providing intelligence to Shadow Vector for several years. Lyra recognized all 3 names from her daily interactions at the base. Walsh had performed maintenance checks on aircraft she had observed during her security rounds. Price had been involved in communications procedures she had monitored through her security duties. Kane had briefed flight operations that she had watched from her perimeter positions. "They've been watching me specifically?" "Since your assignment to Nellis," Martinez confirmed. Shadow Vector maintains surveillance on all family members of deceased Phoenix pilots. They were concerned about inherited capabilities but hadn't detected active threats until yesterday's incident. Hunter moved to a tactical display, showing the current status of recovery operations. Phoenix assets are positioning around the Utah facility where the stolen F-35 is being transported. We have surveillance teams, technical specialists, and direct action capabilities ready to execute recovery operations on your authorization. My authorization? Phoenix 7, you're now the operational commander for this mission. Your demonstration of active Phoenix capabilities yesterday makes you the ranking Phoenix asset for current operations. The network has been waiting 5 years for this moment. The responsibility was overwhelming, but Lyra felt her grandfather's training provided the foundation for command decisions. What's the tactical situation at the Utah facility? Foster displayed detailed intelligence on the target location. Former missile testing site converted to private research facility. Officially conducts aerospace component testing for multiple defense contractors. Actually serves as Shadow Vector's primary operations base for the Western United States.
The facility included underground hangar spaces capable of concealing large aircraft, sophisticated communication systems for coordinating network activities, and defensive capabilities that suggested preparation for military-level confrontation. Security consists of approximately 20 personnel with military backgrounds, advanced surveillance systems, and direct communication links to shadow vector leadership, Hunter added. They're expecting some form of response to the aircraft theft, but they don't know about Phoenix network capabilities. Lyra studied the facility layout with tactical precision that drew from her grandfather's training and her own analytical abilities. Ground assault would be difficult due to defensive positioning and advanced warning systems. Air approach would be detected by radar coverage, but they're not expecting infiltration by someone with pilot-level understanding of their operations. "What are you thinking?" Martinez asked. "Single-person infiltration to gather intelligence and confirm aircraft location, followed by coordinated recovery operation using Phoenix assets positioned around the facility," Lyra outlined. "I can approach using knowledge of aerospace facility operations that would allow me to blend with legitimate personnel." Foster consulted real-time intelligence feeds. "The window of opportunity is narrow. Shadow Vector leadership is arriving at the facility tonight for direct supervision of evidence destruction. If we don't act within the next 12 hours, the F-35 and all proof of their activities will be permanently eliminated." The mission parameters were clear, but the risks were enormous. Lyra would be infiltrating a hostile facility with minimal backup, facing an enemy network that had successfully eliminated multiple Phoenix assets over the past 5 years. Failure would mean not just her death, but the permanent concealment of evidence that could expose decades of conspiracy against American military interests. "Phoenix network assets are standing by for your command," Hunter reported. "We have technical specialists ready to extract data from the stolen F-35, direct action teams prepared to secure the facility, and communication intercept capabilities to capture Shadow Vector leadership communications." Lyra felt the weight of command settling over her with surprising naturalness. Her grandfather's training had prepared her for exactly this moment, the point where Phoenix capabilities would be tested against enemies who threatened the foundations of military integrity. "Authorize all Phoenix assets for immediate deployment," she decided. "I'll infiltrate the facility to confirm aircraft location and gather intelligence on Shadow Vector leadership presence. Once I signal confirmation, execute coordinated recovery operations with priority on capturing personnel and evidence rather than eliminating threats." Smiling with evident pride, Martinez told Lyra Sterling would be proud. "Phoenix 7 is ready for active operations." As the meeting concluded and team members moved to execute their assignments, Lyra remained at the tactical display, studying every detail of the facility that would soon test all of her abilities. The conspiracy that killed her grandfather was about to face the capabilities he had spent 15 years developing in his granddaughter. Shadow Vector had made one critical miscalculation. They had underestimated the determination of Phoenix assets to protect the principles that gave meaning to military service. That mistake was about to prove fatal to their operations. Phoenix 7 was going hunting. The Utah desert stretched endlessly under a star-filled sky as Lyra approached the Shadow Vector facility in a stolen maintenance vehicle. She had abandoned her Air Force uniform for civilian technician coveralls that would allow her to blend with legitimate personnel. Her Phoenix training had included detailed instruction on covert infiltration, but this was the first time she would apply those skills against an enemy that had spent years preparing for exactly this type of operation. The facility emerged from the desert landscape like a technological fortress, gleaming buildings surrounded by security fencing, guard towers equipped with advanced surveillance systems, and underground structures that suggested capabilities far beyond routine aerospace testing. Through her night vision equipment, she could see the stolen F-35 being moved toward a large underground hangar by specialized transport equipment.
"Phoenix 7, Phoenix 3, came the whispered voice of Colonel Hunter through her encrypted communication device. "We have eyes on the facility, confirming 23 hostile personnel, advanced electronic countermeasures, and what appears to be preparation for aircraft destruction within the next 2 hours. "Phoenix 3, Phoenix 7,
Understood. I'm beginning infiltration now. Maintain overwatch positions until my signal for coordinated action. Lyra had studied the facility's personnel schedules through intelligence provided by the Phoenix network. A shift change at 2300 hours would create a brief window of confusion that she could exploit to gain entry. Her technical background allowed her to understand the legitimate operations conducted at the site, providing cover for her presence among actual aerospace workers. The security checkpoint at the main gate was staffed by guards whose alertness suggested military training, but their procedures followed standard civilian contractor protocols. Lyra presented forged credentials identifying her as a software technician responding to an emergency maintenance call, a cover story that would explain her presence and provide access to areas where the F-35 was being held. "Evening, ma'am," the security guard said, scanning her identification badge. "Kind of late for software work, isn't it?" "Critical system fault in the flight control testing bay," Lyra replied, using terminology that demonstrated legitimate knowledge of the facility's operations. "The main contractor sent me out from Edwards to troubleshoot before morning operations." The guard nodded and waved her through, his attention already shifting to the next vehicle in line. Shadow Vector's security protocols were sophisticated enough to detect military or intelligence infiltration, but they hadn't anticipated someone with both technical aerospace knowledge and Phoenix operational capabilities. Inside the facility, Lyra moved through corridors that hummed with activity despite the late hour. Legitimate technicians worked alongside Shadow Vector personnel, most unaware that their employer was conducting operations far beyond authorized aerospace testing. Her Phoenix training allowed her to identify hostile personnel through subtle behavioral cues, the way they carried themselves, positioned themselves relative to potential threats, and communicated with each other using abbreviated phrases that suggested military backgrounds. "Maintenance Base 7, I heard one technician tell another. They want that bird ready for disposal by 0400 hours. Lyra followed corridor signs toward the indicated location, her route taking her deeper into the facility's underground levels. The architecture changed as she descended, reinforced concrete walls, blast-resistant doors, and security systems that suggested preparation for operations requiring absolute secrecy. Through a reinforced window, she caught her first glimpse of the stolen F-35 in its underground hangar. The aircraft was surrounded by technicians who were removing panels and accessing internal systems with the efficiency of people following detailed technical procedures. But their work wasn't routine maintenance. They were systematically extracting components and installing what appeared to be explosive charges designed to destroy evidence of Shadow Vector's software modifications. "Phoenix 7, Phoenix 5, came a whispered transmission from Angela Foster, who was monitoring electronic communications from her position outside the facility. "Intercepting communication about VIP arrival within 30 minutes. Shadow Vector leadership is en route for direct supervision of evidence destruction."
From her concealed position behind maintenance equipment, she could hear radio communications indicating that Shadow Vector leadership had arrived at the facility and were demanding immediate completion of aircraft disposal procedures. "Phoenix assets, Phoenix 7. I have a visual on the target aircraft, confirming explosive charges being installed for evidence destruction. Estimate completion of hostile operations within 15 minutes. Phoenix 7, Phoenix 3. Understood. Breaching facility perimeter now. Maintain position and prepare for coordinated recovery operation." Through the hangar's communication system, Lyra heard an announcement that confirmed her worst fears. "All personnel, security alert level red. Hostile forces detected approaching the facility. Initiate lockdown procedures immediately." Shadow Vector had detected the Phoenix recovery team's approach. The facility's defenses were activating, and Lyra was trapped underground with no exit route except through areas now swarming with armed security personnel. The explosions began 30 seconds later as Phoenix assets engaged facility defenses with military precision. Through the concrete walls, Lyra could hear the distinctive sounds of coordinated assault operations, controlled detonations, breaching security barriers, suppressed weapon fire eliminating defensive positions, and tactical communications coordinating movement through hostile territory. "Phoenix 7, Phoenix 3. We're through outer defenses but encountering heavy resistance.
Underground facilities are sealed off. We need internal assistance to complete breach operations. Lyra assessed her tactical situation with Phoenix-trained clarity. She was alone in an underground facility with hostile personnel, but she possessed knowledge of the facility layout and access codes that could enable Phoenix forces to reach the critical areas before Shadow Vector completed evidence destruction. Phoenix 3, Phoenix 7. I can provide internal breach support, but I need covering fire to reach the main security console. Phoenix 7, stand by for external distraction. The lights went out as Phoenix forces cut power to the main facility. Emergency lighting activated, casting red shadows throughout the underground complex and creating the confused conditions that would allow her to move between positions without immediate detection. Using night vision equipment from her infiltration kit, Lyra moved through the darkened facility toward the main security control room. Her Phoenix training had included extensive instruction in facility breach operations, emphasizing the importance of controlling security systems to enable friendly force entry. She encountered 3 Shadow Vector guards in the corridor leading to the control room. Her grandfather's combat training took over as she engaged multiple opponents using techniques designed for confined spaces and superior numbers. Within seconds, all 3 guards were neutralized without permanent injury, but her presence was now known throughout the facility. Intruder in Section C, came broadcasts over the facility communication system. Armed personnel respond immediately.
Phoenix 3, Phoenix 7. I'm at the main security console, but under immediate threat. I need external pressure to draw hostile forces away from my position. Phoenix 7, Phoenix 3. Initiating diversionary assault on the main facility entrance. You have approximately 5 minutes before they redirect to your location. Lyra's fingers flew over the security console, disabling locks throughout the underground complex and providing Phoenix forces with access routes to critical areas. Her technical training allowed her to understand the facility's defensive systems well enough to turn them against Shadow Vector personnel, sealing hostile forces in sections while opening passages for recovery teams. The underground hangar where the F-35 was stored could be accessed through a maintenance tunnel that would bypass the main security checkpoints. She transmitted the route information to Phoenix recovery teams while maintaining her position at the security console to coordinate their approach. Phoenix assets, Phoenix 7. Underground hangar accessible through maintenance level 3. Corridor designation Baker 7. Target aircraft location confirmed. Be advised, explosive charges are armed and timed for detonation. Phoenix 7, Phoenix Recovery Team Alpha. We're moving through your designated route. Estimate arrival at target location in 3 minutes. Through security cameras, Lyra watched Phoenix forces move through the facility with professional precision. Colonel Hunter led the assault team with tactical expertise that demonstrated decades of military experience, while Angela Foster coordinated electronic warfare operations that were systematically disabling Shadow Vector communication systems. The confrontation in the underground hangar was brief but decisive. Phoenix recovery specialists secured the F-35 while eliminating the explosive charges that would have destroyed critical evidence. Shadow Vector personnel who resisted were neutralized with minimal force, while those who appeared to be legitimate contractors were secured for later questioning. Phoenix 7, Recovery Team Alpha. Target aircraft is secure. Evidence extraction in progress. Shadow Vector leadership attempting to escape through emergency exit routes. Lyra accessed facility schematics through the security console, identifying emergency passages that Shadow Vector leadership was using to avoid capture. Phoenix assets, emergency exits located in building sections Alpha and Charlie. Recommend positioning teams to intercept fleeing personnel. Phoenix 7, Phoenix 3, teams moving to intercept positions. Estimate facility secured within 10 minutes. As dawn approached the Utah desert, the Shadow Vector facility had been transformed from a secret operations base into evidence of one of the most significant conspiracies in modern military history. Phoenix forces had successfully recovered the F-35, captured key personnel, and seized terabytes of data documenting 15 years of systematic sabotage against American aerospace programs.
But even as Phoenix 7 savored this victory, she knew that larger challenges lay ahead. The evidence they had gathered would require careful presentation to prevent political interference, and Shadow Vector's international connections suggested that some network elements might escape accountability through foreign protection. The Phoenix Initiative had returned to active operations, but its ultimate success would depend on ensuring that the truth about Shadow Vector's activities reached the American people despite powerful interests that would prefer the conspiracy remain hidden forever. 6 months after the Shadow Vector facility raid, Lieutenant Colonel Lyra Chen stood before the Senate Armed Services Committee in a hearing room packed with media representatives, defense industry officials, and intelligence community personnel. The oak-paneled chamber buzzed with tension as senators prepared to question the woman whose testimony would determine the fate of one of the most significant conspiracy investigations in modern military history. Lieutenant Colonel Chen began Senator Patricia Walsh, the committee chairwoman. Your rapid promotion from staff sergeant to lieutenant colonel is unprecedented in peacetime military service. Can you explain the circumstances that led to this advancement? Lyra wore the blue service uniform of an Air Force officer, her chest decorated with ribbons that told only part of her story. The Phoenix Initiative remained classified, but her role in exposing Shadow Vector had earned recognition that couldn't be completely hidden behind security restrictions. Ma'am, my promotion reflects specialized capabilities that have become relevant to national security interests. The specific details remain classified, but I can confirm that my actions contributed to the exposure of systematic sabotage affecting multiple aerospace programs. Senator Robert Morrison, ranking minority member, leaned forward with obvious skepticism. Colonel Chen, your personnel file shows no pilot training, no aerospace engineering background, and no intelligence experience prior to the events in question. How does someone with your background suddenly become qualified to lead complex counterintelligence operations? The question struck at the heart of what Lyra couldn't reveal publicly. Her Phoenix abilities, her grandfather's training, and the clandestine network that had prepared her for exactly this moment remained protected by classification levels that exceeded the committee's clearance. Senator, specialized training programs exist within the military that don't appear in standard personnel records. My qualifications were developed through channels that remain classified for national security reasons. Senator Walsh consulted classified briefing materials that had been provided to the committee under strict security protocols. The evidence you provided has led to indictments of 47 individuals across military, government, and private sector positions. Can you summarize the scope of the conspiracy you uncovered? Lyra had spent months preparing for this moment, working with prosecutors and intelligence analysts to present Shadow Vector's activities in ways that revealed their scope without compromising ongoing operations. Ma'am, Shadow Vector represented a systematic effort to manipulate American defense procurement through sabotage, elimination of key personnel, and corruption of technical evaluation processes. Their activities affected fighter aircraft development, satellite systems, missile defense programs, and transport aircraft acquisitions over a 15-year period. The financial impact? Preliminary estimates suggest Shadow Vector's manipulation of defense contracts resulted in the waste of approximately $12 billion in taxpayer funds, while compromising military capabilities that endangered American service members and national security. The hearing room stirred as the magnitude of the conspiracy became clear to observers.
Shadow Vector hadn't just stolen money. They had weakened American military superiority while enriching foreign competitors and corrupted domestic officials. Senator Morrison pressed for details that touched on the most sensitive aspects of the investigation. Colonel Chen, 7 military personnel died in what appeared to be accidents over the 5 years preceding your investigation. Are you alleging that Shadow Vector was responsible for murdering American service members? Senator, the evidence strongly suggests that Shadow Vector eliminated individuals who posed threats to their operations. These weren't random accidents, but targeted killings designed to protect a conspiracy that threatened the foundations of American military procurement. Among the observers in the gallery, Lyra could see Colonel Martinez and Colonel Hunter, both now serving as senior advisors to the newly reconstituted Phoenix Initiative. Their presence provided reassurance that the capabilities her grandfather had developed would continue protecting American interests through official channels rather than shadow networks. "What is your current assignment, Colonel Chen?" Senator Walsh inquired. "Nem, I serve as Director of Aerospace Security Integration, a new position created to prevent future compromises of critical defense programs. My responsibilities include evaluation of procurement security, personnel screening, and technical verification of contractor performance." The bureaucratic language concealed the reality of her role. Phoenix 7 now operated as the command authority for a network of specially selected personnel who possessed abilities that conventional security systems couldn't provide. They monitored defense programs for signs of foreign infiltration, evaluated personnel for indicators of corruption, and maintained capabilities to respond to threats that required unconventional solutions. Senator Morrison raised concerns that reflected ongoing political resistance to the investigation's implications. "Colonel Chen, critics suggest that your allegations represent an attempt to justify expanded military intelligence operations against American citizens and domestic industries. How do you respond to those concerns?" Lyra had anticipated this attack, recognizing it as part of a broader effort to minimize Shadow Vector's exposure and protect remaining network elements that had escaped immediate prosecution. "Senator, the evidence speaks for itself. Shadow Vector's activities were documented through their own communications, financial records, and technical sabotage. Our investigation focused exclusively on preventing further damage to American military capabilities, not expanding surveillance authorities." The hearing continued for 4 hours, covering technical details of Shadow Vector's sabotage methods, the international connections that had supported their operations, and the ongoing efforts to identify remaining network elements that might still pose threats to defense programs. During a recess, Lyra was approached by Angela Foster, who now served as Deputy Director for Aerospace Counterintelligence within the Defense Intelligence Agency. "How do you think it's going?" Foster asked quietly. "Better than expected. The evidence is strong enough to withstand political pressure, but there are still senators who'd prefer this story to disappear quietly." "Any regrets about accepting the public role instead of remaining in shadow operations?" Lyra considered the question while watching media representatives interview defense industry officials in the corridor outside the hearing room. "Grandpa taught me that the best service is preservation of principles, not personal convenience. This testimony ensures that Shadow Vector's activities become part of the public record, where future conspiracies will have to account for increased scrutiny." When the hearing resumed, Senator Walsh addressed the broader implications of the Shadow Vector investigation. "Colonel Chen, what measures are being implemented to prevent similar conspiracies from compromising defense programs in the future?" "Ma'am, we've established enhanced security protocols for critical programs, expanded background investigation requirements for personnel with access to sensitive information, and created specialized oversight capabilities that can detect anomalies in contractor performance. The enhanced protocols included provisions for Phoenix-trained personnel to monitor programs using capabilities that conventional security systems couldn't provide." Future conspiracies would face observation and analysis from individuals whose inherited abilities made them nearly impossible to deceive or eliminate through traditional methods. What is your assessment of current threats to American aerospace programs? Senator, Shadow Vector represented the most sophisticated conspiracy we've identified, but their international connections suggest that foreign adversaries continue developing methods to compromise American military advantages. Vigilance remains essential, and our response capabilities must evolve to match emerging threats. As the hearing concluded, Senator Walsh delivered closing remarks that would define how history remembered the Shadow Vector investigation. The evidence presented by Colonel Chen and her colleagues represents one of the most significant counterintelligence successes in recent decades. Their work has not only exposed systematic corruption affecting billions of dollars in defense spending, but has also prevented the compromise of military capabilities that protect American lives around the world. Senator Morrison offered a more cautious assessment that reflected ongoing political divisions about the investigation's implications. While acknowledging the serious nature of the evidence presented, we must ensure that security enhancements don't create bureaucratic burdens that impede legitimate defense innovation. Following the hearing, Lyra was approached by Major Thompson, the F-35 pilot whose emergency landing had initiated the chain of events that exposed Shadow Vector. He had followed the investigation closely, testifying in closed sessions about the software modifications that nearly killed him. Colonel Chen, I wanted to thank you personally for what you did that day at Nellis. Without your intervention, I wouldn't be here to see these people brought to justice. Major, you were investigating contract irregularities that led to Shadow Vector's exposure. Your work was just as important as the emergency assistance I provided. Maybe, but you're the one who connected the pieces and made sure the truth came out. That takes courage that goes beyond military training. Thompson's words reflected a recognition that appeared throughout the investigation, acknowledgement that conventional military systems, despite their sophistication and dedication, sometimes required capabilities that existed outside normal parameters. 3 months after the Senate hearing, Lyra stood in Arlington National Cemetery beside her grandfather's grave, accompanied by the surviving members of his Phoenix network. The headstone now bore additional inscription recognizing Colonel David Sterling's contributions to aerospace security, a partial acknowledgement of service that had remained classified for decades. He would be proud, Colonel Martinez observed, laying flowers at the gravesite. Phoenix 7 has exceeded every expectation he had for inherited capabilities. The network is stronger now than it was during the original program, Colonel Hunter added. Official recognition provides resources and authority that shadow operations never possessed. Lyra reflected on the transformation that had occurred since that stormy afternoon when she first revealed her abilities to save Major Thompson's life. The frightened security guard who had hidden her talents behind routine duties had evolved into someone who accepted responsibility for protecting capabilities that served principles larger than personal comfort. "What's next for Phoenix operations?" she asked the assembled veterans. "Expansion. We've identified 12 individuals from military families with potential Phoenix capabilities. Official program status allows us to provide training and development that can prevent future conspiracies from threatening American interests." The Phoenix Initiative had been reborn through official channels, no longer dependent on shadow networks and personal relationships. Future generations would inherit capabilities that were recognized, supported, and directed toward clear objectives that served American values, rather than hidden agendas. Standing in the quiet cemetery, surrounded by markers honoring generations of military service, Lyra understood that her grandfather's legacy had achieved its intended purpose. The abilities he had cultivated through patient training had prevented systemic corruption from permanently compromising American military superiority. But more importantly, those abilities had preserved the principle that military service should protect democratic institutions rather than serve private interests. Shadow Vector's defeat ensured that future defense programs would face oversight from people who possessed both the skills to detect sophisticated deception and the commitment to expose threats regardless of political consequences. As sunset painted the cemetery in golden light, Lyra Chen, Phoenix 7, prepared for whatever challenges would test the capabilities she had inherited and the principles she had sworn to defend. The Phoenix had returned to official service, carrying forward traditions that connected Revolutionary War sharpshooters to modern aerospace security specialists. The eagle flies at dawn when shadows grow long, and wise hunters know when to take the shot. Colonel David Sterling's granddaughter had learned both lessons well, ensuring that Phoenix capabilities would continue protecting American interests for generations yet to come. In the distance, a military transport aircraft crossed the sky, with engines that sang of precision engineering and dedicated service. Phoenix 7 watched its passage with eyes trained to see what others missed, ready for whatever threats might emerge from the shadows that surrounded American military excellence. The hunt continues, as it always has, guided by inherited wisdom and unwavering commitment to principles worth defending, regardless of personal cost. That is the Phoenix legacy, and that is why it endures. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hits the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.